So my name is Jim Minkler, and I'm a volunteer for the Aberdeen Friends of the Aberdeen Museum, and this is the Voices of Grace Harbor Oral History Project. And I'm very fortunate to have with me today Clifton Todd, who has a lot of stories to tell because he has a lifetime being associated with Grace Harbor. So, Clifton, I'm going to start, or Cliff, as you prefer to be called, I'm going to just start off with some basic questions for the historical record. And the first question I have is, what is your full name?
It's Clifton DeForest Todd.
And what were your parents' names?
It was Harold DeForest Todd was my dad, and
Frida.
Frida Gertrude Todd was my mother.
And so were they born in the harbor, or did they come to the harbor?
They came from Idaho.
Okay.
I was born in Idaho.
Where at in Idaho?
Bonners Ferry.
Bonners Ferry. Okay. I was born in Lewiston, so. So when did they come to the harbor, or when did you come to the harbor?
Well, when I was a year old, I lived there for a year with my parents, of course, and my brother and two sisters. And well, one sister, because one wasn't born yet. And so my dad owned some timberland, and he made railroad ties and sold them to the railroad. And a forest fire came through, and it wiped out his timber and his bunkhouse and almost got his house.
Wow.
And so then he packed up and moved to Washington.
What year was that?
Well, I was a year old, so it'd have to have been 1926.
1926. Oh. And so once they got to the harbor, then did he stay in the timber industry?
Well, when he got to the harbor, he worked in the cedar mill out there on where Woodlawn addition to Hokum is.
Oh, okay.
That used to be a cedar mill. It's a plywood mill now.
Yes.
But he worked there, and he got cedar asthma, and then that was the end of that job, and he went down to Oregon and worked in the hay and ranches down there. He got bit up by ticks.
Oh.
And he got Lyme disease.
Oh, no.
So when I was 12 years old, my dad was already disabled. He couldn't work. This was during the panic, when nobody hardly could get a job and stuff.
So it was in the early 1930s?
Yeah, right. See, I was, at first we lived across the river before the Panhandle Bridge was ever put in. And we had a rowboat back and forth to get to town. And then we moved into Woodlawn, and my dad built a house. And of course, I was 4 years old when my mother passed away. And my dad never remarried or never had another wife.
She was fairly young then when she passed away.
Very young, yeah. And so we lived in this house that my dad built, and that's where I grew up mostly in Woodlawn, was in this house.
Is that house still there?
No, it's gone. The plywood expanded their land. They bought 2 lots from my brother, and then they, when my dad passed away in 1959, it must have been in March 1959, when he passed away, we sold his house to a guy, and later they sold his property to plywood, and they took the house out.
So you went to school then in Hoquiam,
I went to the Lincoln Grade School.
Lincoln Grade School.
Yes. My route to school was down the railroad tracks to that railroad bridge. It still sits there, but it's not used anymore.
Right.
And then it was about the time I got to the Showboat Tavern, the tardy bell would ring, and I had to do my best to get there before it was tardy. But that was an interesting route to go to school. And
And then where did you go to middle school at? Or junior, where did you go to junior high at?
I went to the junior high in Hoquiam.
Okay.
And let's see, it was a junior high. No, I quit school in the 10th grade,
Okay.
and I went into the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCCs. They were a government-sponsored thing for. I was in the CCCs, and my dad was in the WPA. They were projects brought up by President Roosevelt for poor people like us that couldn't have a job. That's what we did. And I learned to work in that CCC.
What were some of the projects you worked on back then in the
Well,
CCC?
we built truck trails in Capitol Forest, and we built bridges, wooden bridges across sloughs for farmers, and we stabilized river banks for other farmers to keep the river from washing the land away. And let's see what else. Oh, we went down to Oregon. See, the war started then, as the war was going. And so we went down to Oregon to a side camp at Warrington, Oregon. And we were stationed at the camp, and we would go out to the beach during the day, and we harvested this Russian beach grass. And they bundled it up and loaded it into trucks and brought it up to Westport and planted it on the beach.
Okay.
And by the barbed wire entanglements at Westport there. So a lot of that grass you see there is grass we probably started.
Wow.
Because it was just sand before. But anyway, while we were down there harvesting this grass, one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, that's when we got up to get ready to go out and work. They told us we're not going to the beach today. And so, well, what happened? A Japanese submarine had surfaced out there.
Really?
And fired a few rounds into the dunes area where we were harvesting our grass. And we didn't get to go out there until they had ordnance inspected because they thought there might be some live rounds laying in there. And it was right near Battery Russell. And that was just south of Warrington.
Okay.
And so that was my first engagement with the Japanese.
Right. Well, that's quite a story, and I hadn't heard that they'd actually fired live rounds.
Yeah, they did, and there's a plaque on Battery Russell. They did not return the fire because they didn't want that submarine to know where they were.
Oh, okay.
And those guns down there, great big guns, and they'd fire, but there was no fire control. It hit where it could hit. But anyway, it was the submarine left. There was a lot of seaplanes and stuff that you could hear them flying all over the place looking for whatever that was,
So you were in the CCC during the first part of the war.
Yeah, I was in the CCC camp, and then they disbanded it, and so I went into a forestry. I was employed by I think it was the U.S. Forestry, and we worked up at Quinault, and our mission was to go through the big trees up there and take all the underbrush out, because the Japanese were sending balloon bombs over, and they would get over the state and they would drop these bombs. There was a few of them found in Montana. There was one in Oregon they found, but they would explode and start fire. So what the idea was, we would all this big trees in by Lake Quinault, we'd keep the brush out from under, get the brush clear. So that was.
That must have been fairly hard work.
Oh boy, and a downpouring rain right in the wintertime.
Oh my.
Yeah, and we were introduced to tin pants and tin coats.
Okay.
And that was those heavy leather things that they had to wear. And we were billeted in the Canal Hotel.
Wow.
And it was so funny that they had closed the hotel, but the forestry got it, so we were living in there. That's where our quarters were.
Pretty nice quarters.
Yeah, they were nice. And we ate our meals there and stuff. It was a good adventure. And then after that, I went to work in the Grace Harbor veneer mill there in Woodlawn. And I worked there for a while. And then I got to be, I was 17. October the 2nd, I was going to be 18. Of course, the war was going full bore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided that I wanted to enlist in the Navy. I didn't want to be drafted. I wanted to enlist in the Navy. So I did. I went up to Seattle and enlisted. So on my 18th birthday, I'm sitting in the top bunk of the receiving center at Farragut, Idaho, to start my boot training. I'll never forget coming in there on the bus and these sailors walking along the side there yelling at us, "You'll be sorry."
Not very encouraging.
Yeah. But we survived that. It was very cold there, but we survived that. And then I went to Bremerton, and I was at the Navy station at Bremerton. And I was an apprentice seaman, and
Yeah, go on. I just made sure we're still recording.
oh, okay. Well, anyway, I was an apprentice seaman in Bremerton, and they gave me a badge. It said Petty Officer Police. They gave me a .38 pistol, and they sent me over to the laundry. They had the prisoners working in the laundry. And when they had to go to the bathroom, I was to escort them to the bathroom.
So that was your start in law enforcement?
No, well, it was part of it.
Yeah.
But the Marine, there was a Marine guard, and he was the main guard there. I was just the guy to take him up to the bathroom so they could, back and forth. But anyway, one day I said to the Marine guard, I said, "Where's the clip in that 45? He didn't have it.
Oh.
That's terrible if you got caught like that. So he went, I took to his spot, and he went to back to his barracks and got his clip and came back. Nobody knew the difference. But anyway, that was Bremerton. And then there came a thing on the bulletin board there that said I had been assigned to VC 78.
VC 78.
A squadron. The VC stands for Air Composite, and that means it was fighter bombers and fighter planes that made up this VC 78 squadron. So I went to Sand Point, Seattle, and I'm Navy station there, and I went through training so that I could fire a 50 caliber machine gun out of that turret on the back of the torpedo bomber. Although all during my training, I never got into a torpedo bomber. I just did it on one thing, we had a turret set up, and we had a 12 gauge shotgun, and we were shooting skeet with it. And so anyway, I got the flu and I didn't finish my course. And the squadron moved up to, let's see, it was Arlington, Washington. There was an old Navy air station there, so we went up there, and I appeared late from my group, and anyhow, the first class petty officer said, "You're going to go to the mess cooking." So I went and I mess cooked. I didn't cook, but I helped the cooks do things, you know, like potato peeling and stuff like that. So then we went, we were there for a while, and I was mess cooking. Then we moved to Hopeville, California. And there was an air base right next to the Walking Hills down there. That's those sand dunes that blow a lot. So we survived one big dust storm down there. Where was I? I was in the mess hall. I was working in there, so I had food and everything I needed. But they had an awful time cleaning that air base up again from that dust storm. But they got it clean. And then from there we went out to San Diego, and we boarded the USS Saginaw Bay.
Okay.
And that was a CVE carrier. And so then the carrier, we practiced, our pilots practiced landing on that carrier, and we were off of the shore there somewhere. And then we went back to Hopeville, and we went out again, went on the carrier another time. And when we came back from that, we went to Los Alamitos, California. That's up by LA.
Right.
And there was a Navy base there. And let's see, we went there, and then I went aboard the carrier as ship's company. I no longer was BC-78. Now I'm ship's company. And they signed me to mess cooking. And so I went down there, and I had nothing against that. 2 on, 2 off, all the time in the States. That was great, you know. So I went down there, and I was ready to do my job, and the yeoman sent somebody down there and took me out of there and told me that I was going to be a plane handler on the hangar deck.
Wow.
That I had 4 months mess cooking. You're only allowed 3. So I did. I was a plane handler on the hangar deck, and when the planes came down the elevator, you positioned them and tied them down and stuff like that. And so we took a load, went to Anahuac down in there, and come back to Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal. We went back there and unloaded stuff that we took planes over and stuff, and we took people over and things. And when that was done, we went up to the Admiralty Islands, and we became part of the 7th Fleet. That was MacArthur's fleet. And there was we were the flag for Carrier Division 25, and it was about, it might have been 10 or so carriers in our group. And so then we went to Pitiloo, and MacArthur wanted that island because it was on his way to get back to the Philippines.
Right.
So he wanted that island secured. So we went there, and the battleships and us, and we tore that island up, and finally they got secured it. And so we came back to Manus, and then we left there, and we went to Leyte, and we took MacArthur to Leyte. And our job mostly was to escort these huge flotations of ships. You could look out across that ocean, so all you see was ships. and so that was the landing force. Well, we got an assignment that, after being there a bit, it was they loaded some old airplanes on us that were they were ready to have some major work done on them to keep them going, and we headed south out of there, and that's when the Japanese fleet came out and caught those guys, and then it was after that that we came back, and we went back to Manus again, and then it was let's see, we went to Manus. Oh, the next time we were going to Luzon, the upper part of the Philippines near Manila, up there where Corregidor was and that stuff. So we went up there, and one thing is, that suicide bombing stuff started, and their number one target was aircraft carriers. And so we saw one or two of those, and they didn't hit us, but they tried. And then we went back and we went to Ulithi, Anchorage. And then we went up to Iwo Jima, and we helped take that island.
You saw a lot of
the
really
big
fierce
third
fighting.
fleet would go through there with the big battle wagons, the big carriers, and they would soften them up, and then we would come with the troops, and we'd give air support for the troops. And the Marines really caught it at Iwo. But after Iwo, we went back, and one time or another we went back to the States, and we had some work done on our carrier and stuff. And at one time, while we were at Manus, we went into a floating dry dock. It was quite a thing. It sunk, our carrier went into it, and it pumped up, and there our carrier sat. And our job was every soul on that carrier had to get out of the big scraper and scrape the barnacles and stuff off the bottom of that carrier.
That wasn't pleasant.
That was a nasty job.
Yeah.
But anyway, we wanted our carrier to go faster
Yeah.
after the Japanese had caught them out in the open there. We didn't. Our top speed was 18 knots, and most of those Japanese wagons would do at least 35 knots.
Well, Cliff, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. You rescued my father. He was a prisoner of war in Japan. Had the war gone on any longer, he wouldn't have made it, because he was almost had died from malaria, and so taking Iwo Jima and finally getting the Japanese to surrender was huge, and he was able to survive, and so I'm here.
Yeah. Well, she's here because I survived.
That's right. So you got back to Grace Harbor then after the war.
Well, we went to Okinawa first.
Okinawa, right.
We'd done Okinawa. Then I was sent back to Bremerton, and the Navy, and they put me on a seagoing tug, a big tug, and so I did my time there. The first thing that struck me was we walked into that mess hall. Here sat the bowl of food, plates, silverware, stuff. You just sit down and help yourself.
Wow.
I almost re-upped. But anyway, then I got out of the service, and after I got out of the service, I came back to Hoquiam.
And that was what, 45, 46?
46.
46, okay.
And I lived there with my dad in Woodlawn for a while. And let's see, I worked at the veneer plant again. I went to work there. And there was a pretty little girl that lived in Woodlawn. And next thing I know, there's our daughter. And I had a son, Anyway,
Was your wife a local? Was she from the harbor?
yeah, she was a local girl. And anyway, that marriage it didn't work out. It just didn't. And we won't go into those details at all.
Okay.
And then I met and married another girl, and I was with her for 63 years.
What was her name?
Helen,
Helen.
and she was a Monsieur. They owned that big dairy farm just south of Elma.
Okay, Monsieur. That's M-O-N-S. How do you spell that?
Mounser.
Okay, thank you.
CER.
Huh?
CER.
CER, okay. Yeah, that's CER. But anyway, our marriage lasted until she died here just recently.
63 years. That's
Yeah.
Tell about the jailhouse.
Huh?
Tell about the jailhouse.
Well, when I first became a deputy sheriff, the sheriff told me that if I went down there and looked at that jailhouse down there in Copalis Beach, that I could have that job. And so I went and looked at it. I took her and her mother, and we went down and we looked at it and said, yeah, we can live here. And so I was big and strong. I had nothing like I am now. I have a picture of me on the counter.
We
there
still
walking
look
with
awfully
my wife.
fit. Very, very fit for your age.
Muscles.
Yeah.
But anyway, I survived 6 months down there, and I lived in that little house. It had a jail attachment to it. The front room was partially a office for the sheriff's office, and it was everything west and north of Hoquiam was my jurisdiction where I had to work. And we had a couple of knotheads, but we survived it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved into the main office, and
Was the main office in Hoquiam?
in Montesano.
In Montesano. Oh.
That's where the courthouse is.
Yeah.
So we operated out of that, and then the sheriff came to me one day, and the pay was stinky, real poor pay. So he came to me one day and he said, "What rank would you like to have?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well," he said, I can move you up so you make a little more money." So I said, "Well, how about captain?" "Okay," he said, "you're a captain now."
So what year would this have been?
Huh?
What year about was this?
That must have been 1954.
1954. Okay.
And I worked as his captain for a short while. And the town of Elma, they would pay me an extra $100 a month if I'd come up there and be the marshal. So I told Dick, I said, Dick Simmons was my sheriff. I said, I'm going to move up there. I said, I can't make it on this pay here. I can't do it. So I moved up there and took that town marshal job. And that took me to a point where, in January the 31st, 1959, I had taken the exam for the Aberdeen Police Department because I wanted civil service. So that night that I went to work in Aberdeen was the night that Captain Nick Jansen and his other officers raided the Curtis Hotel.
Wow.
contrary to the chief's liking and to the mayor's liking. And the Nick Jansen came to me and he said, "Whatever you do, you stay out of this." Well, I knew I got 2 years probation. I was sure to keep my mouth shut and stay out of it. So I did, and I survived all that.
Was the Curtis house there on F Street? Where was that?
It was Curtis. It was just before you went up the bridge. Over the bridge wasn't there, of course. Just before that right on that street. What is that? Was that G, H? I think H was the one that went up over the bridge. I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, it was right there.
Yeah.
Well, that night, I was working with a pretty well-known Aberdeen policeman, John Bebbage.
Okay.
And I had 8 years' experience, and he had about 2. And of course, I'm the rookie because he's the 2 years. Anyway, he said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, John, while I was a deputy sheriff under prosecutor Don Abel, we've raided these houses before." And so I said, "I know all about that, you know." And I said, this is the captain. He says, "Go to the back of that hotel and bring the Johns and the girls over and book them in the station, at the police station." Well, he was very upset. He was a loyalist, as I call him. And so anyway, we did do it. We went and picked him up and took him to the station, and they had an awful squabble, but I stayed out of it. I didn't want any part of it. And once that was all settled down and everything, Mayor Failer decided that Pat Gallagher, who had been a long-time chief there, should go. So he dismissed Pat Gallagher. I don't know how he did it, but he got him to leave. Well, Gallagher, as soon as he was out of there, he ran for sheriff and got the election.
Oh.
I don't know if you know, but sheriffs have jurisdiction over city police.
Yeah. Now, why was the mayor so opposed to the Curtis house being raided?
He thought that Gallagher was too soft on the troops, and there was too much things that he thought Gallagher should do that Gallagher didn't do. He didn't want to do it. Pat Gallagher was a very, very easygoing guy. And anyhow, as far as I'm concerned, he was a good chief. So anyway, after that, Walt brought a guy over from Ellensburg. Well, the guy happened to be a Kenny Butler. He was the chief of police in Ellensburg. And so Kenny took over the Aberdeen department then. And he didn't have a chance. I knew Kenny Butler because he was a undersheriff when I was a deputy under him.
Oh, here in Grace Harbor.
Yeah, so I knew him quite well. He'd been a Hokum policeman before that.
Okay.
So he was well known here. But anyway, in my estimation, Kenny was really a good policeman. But anyway, the citizens of Aberdeen, the friends of Pat Gallagher, and all those other people, they wouldn't let Kenny do the job that he should be doing. But they throwed all kinds of wrenches in his gears so he couldn't get it done. And so he left. There was an attorney down at Westport that wrote the darndest story about that.
Oh.
I wish I had it, but it was a long story. It was in the Aberdeen World, of course. But anyway, after Kenny left, then he appointed Dave Hour as chief then, who was the captain on the department.
What's the last name?
Huh?
What was the last name?
Dave Hour,
Hour.
Auer, Hour.
Okay, thank you.
And he promoted him as chief. Well, I'd say Dave did all right. You know, he was there quite a while. And then Dave retired. So then he promoted John Bevish as chief. And John was there for a while. He wasn't there a long time, but he was there for a while. And he became pretty much disabled. His legs went out on him, his feet went out on him, and he took a disability retirement. And so then Mayor Failer wanted a nationwide search to get a chief of police. And so anyway, I made out my application for the job and my resume and turned it in. Well, I don't think he even looked at it. Anyway, he went up to North Bend. Let's see, did he get, no, first of all, he went to Seaside and he brought that guy up here. That guy was chief of police one day.
Oh, it's a
He
short
left.
stint.
He calls up the mayor and says that I don't want to go up there. There's too much problems. And so he left. And then Feder was, I could tell, he I don't know whether he blamed us for it or not. But we didn't do nothing to the guy. But anyway, he went up to North Bend. And he got a guy who was an ex-Marine. He was a chief up at North Bend, up by the pass.
Okay.
And so that was Les Kennedy.
Les Kennedy.
So Les came down, and he got together with me, and we found out we could work good together. And so we were trotting along there and doing our job. And
Is this still in the 1960s?
Yeah, this had to be back in, let's see. I retired in 1980, so it has to be past that. What can I tie in there? we go back to 1959 is when I joined the department.
Right.
And 1964, I made sergeant, and 1966, I made lieutenant. 1970, I made captain. So it was while I was a captain, so it had been somewhere after 1970.
Early 70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anyway, let's see. There was.
So you and Les kind of got.
Huh?
You and Les Kennedy.
Yeah, Les and I got along good.
Yeah.
But Les had been arrested for DUI while he was an Olympia policeman, according to the records. And so they fired him because he hadn't put it on his resume.
Oh.
That's what I heard.
Mhm.
I had no facts of that.
Yeah.
But so he's gone. So now what we're going to do? Well, there was a guy named Jay Skews up in Calhoun County, and he was on the sheriff's office. So Hoquiam hired him as the chief of police in Hoquiam. And so he came down. Well, our guys got together and they thought, well, why can't we have a joint chief? So we'll make Skews the joint chief. And so anyway, he had not looked at my resume at all, I don't think. But anyway, I was not a choice of his. So when he opened up the thing again to find Les Kennedy, I told him flat, I'm not applying for your job. And he wouldn't have brought me anyway. I couldn't have worked for him. he was too dominant.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let's see, Les Kennedy and well, Jay Skews. Then I didn't even apply for the job when they switched over to have the joint chief. But Jay Skews came over and he said, "Cliff, I'll tell you what. You help on this the Aberdeen department. If you need any help, you can contact me. I've got some things I got to straighten up over in Hoquiam, so I won't be over here that much." So I said, "Well, okay." One thing I had gained during the time that I was captain and lieutenant, I had gained the respect of that crew.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of them told me one day, he said, "You were just like my father." Anyway, when I retired, that's how come I got that clock. That's not from the city. That was from the crew.
Wow, that's a beautiful clock.
Yeah. But anyway, it was funny that the crew wanted me to have the job. So anyway, Fader lost the election. Fran White was elected. Fran White, I had moved to Ocean Shores, and I had taken a real estate course. I was going to sell real estate. So I was out there. I wasn't looking for the job. And Fran White called me up and she said, "You got the job."
Oh.
And I said, "Okay, I'll run the department." "Yes, you'll run the department." So that's how I got the job. I was it was what I used to say. Foy was elected mayor after that, and that's when I wouldn't continue as his. I call it Foy's boy, or Fran's man. But anyway,
But Fran let you be your own man, it sounds like. Fran White let you be your own
Oh,
man.
absolutely. She never interfered with the police thing. John Bevich, he took on a thing while he got elected to the council, and he took on a thing that he was criticizing the training that I was getting these guys into. I got a guy trained to be a polygraph operator and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he was making a big fuss about it, Well, she must have stepped on him because I never heard no more.
So what was the most challenging case you ever had when you're police chief?
Let's see. Because I had gone through many schools about police administration, and I was thoroughly convinced that the chief of police did not run that department by himself. So I had Captain Chancellor, Captain Mars, Lieutenant Sundstrom, all people that had designated. So the most challenging one, I didn't do it, but Captain Chancellor did. The mayor shot the neighbor's dog.
Oh.
And so there was a warrant for her arrest. And Chancellor took care of the whole thing. I was smart.
So what happened was this Mayor White?
Yeah.
What
but
happened?
She posted $75 and forfeited
Okay.
with nothing.
Yeah.
I have a book in there that I kept all the clippings of these events, and it's a very interesting book that has all these stories in it. And some of the things that I did was searches. I was in charge of the bloodhound when I was a deputy sheriff, and some of those were very interesting. One in particular was out at Axford Prairie, and this lady and her little daughter had taken a trail through the woods to go to a birthday party, and they hadn't showed up at the party, or they didn't come home.
Wow.
So they were out overnight. So the next day or so, the husband finally called the sheriff. So the sheriff sent me out there with my bloodhound. And I picked up her trail, and I trailed it down to a pretty nice path. And then I broke off, and she went down to the creek and back in like this. And the dog's running back and forth. You have to keep the bloodhound on the leash, so you're going to.
Yeah.
And anyway, I come to the conclusion that she had gone up over this big fern hill, all the big ferns around, but she had on a bright orange dress. So I called the sheriff. I said, Dick, if you could get up over this hill, you'll be able to see. If she's down somewhere on that hill, you'll be able to see this bright orange dress. So he took off. He got Leroy something, I believe was a pilot, and he flew up over. And the agreement was if they saw it, that they'd wobble the wings of the plane. They had no radio in it or anything.
Okay.
So anyway, sure enough, they wobbled the wings, and I took about 30 guys and just did a sweep up there. But before we took there, I knew I was trailing the mother. So I said to these, there was about 5 loggers there. I said, you guys walk this trail out and see if you can see any signs of the little girl, because I think it's just the mother that's up here from the signs I saw. And so they took off down the trail, and we fanned out and we found her. She was down, and we revived her and everything. Well, these guys went down the trail. They hadn't gone very far at all. Here's a little girl sitting under the tree, sat there all night by herself.
Oh my. And she was okay too?
She was just fine.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
So the newspaper said, Maggie fails again. And Maggie had not failed. It was the people who was handling her that failed.
Oh.
She knew that woman had gone down to the creek to get the water for the kid and come back and lost where the kid was.
Oh.
That's why she was wandering all over the place.
Oh, I see.
But anyway, that was solved, that one.
Yeah, I had a good ending at least. That's good.
And another one was up the Wainuchi. There was a girl around 16 years old or so that disappeared off the farm. And so they called, and she'd been gone a couple of days. And so I took Maggie up there, and we got her garment and sniffed it. And Maggie went right straight to the river. And I could see it was nice and clear. There was nobody in there. So well, Maggie, I don't think you got this right. So we came back a couple more times. Then she took a trail and went way up and came up on the highway up there, the road, country road. And there was a whole bunch of little paint samples laying all over the place, you know, by the mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what the heck is this, you know? So then she came down, she took another trail and took down back to the house. Well, I just said, Maggie, we gotta find this girl now, get on it. So she took me out in the middle of that river, up to my knees almost. She was swimming mostly. She was scenting the overhanged woods. She was scenting it with her nose in the air. She wasn't, you know, and she went to that river. We came to a place, and there was the plain marks where there'd been a vehicle parked there, and there was this, a boat had a skag. It was skag drag marks.
Yeah.
Where a boat had been drug out and put in that truck and left.
Oh,
So I went back and told the family, I said, well, somebody picked her up in that truck and they're on. Well, it turned out that they went off somewhere and got married.
Oh, hello.
And that settled that problem. But that dog was tremendous at her.
How long did Maggie live?
I left the sheriff's office, and I don't know who Well, I knew the deputy was handler, and I don't know when she passed away. I didn't know that. But she used to go out and hide in the field, and Maggie would go find her.
It's a cool dog.
So, Lana, were you pretty close to the dog?
You know, I remember the feeling of the dog. I don't really, on all the pictures, but, you know, I remember going in the field and her having her smell something in my clothes, and,
Yeah.
you know, but I don't remember, but where did she come from, Dad? Tell him that.
Well, yeah, she was at McNeil Island.
Mm-hmm.
She was a trained bloodhound for tracking down escaped prisoners. We had a couple of game wardens one time that went out to Lake Sylvia, and they went up and said that they were going to go up there and lay a trail and then hide and see if Maggie could find them. Well, when we went up there, Maggie went and inspected every culvert under that road. Is what she did over at McNeil Island. These guys would crawl in the culvert. So she inspected every one. And the guys had double turback, and so when we came back there, they were back with the group, but we made the loop they made.
Mm-hmm.
But that was interesting that she was looking in those culverts.
Of all your time growing up and working in Grays Harbor, is there any individual or individuals that really stick out in your mind as somebody that really had a positive impact on you?
Did what?
Somebody that really had a positive impact on you?
Ooh. Well, of course, my dad was laid up. There was a guy named Stanley Pelzer, and he sort of substituted as my dad. He was older, much older than me,
Mm-hmm.
but we palled around together. And,
Pelzer, Pelzer.
yeah,
Okay.
and they lived out there on the Panhandle, across the bridge and down there. That's where they lived. And he was kind of like a father figure to me too. And his wife was a real nice lady. She made real good cookies. But anybody else? Anybody else? Oh, Warner Poynan.
Oh, yeah.
Warner Poynan?
Warner Poynan was the principal of the Lincoln School.
Okay.
And I, of course, was no mother, just a dad, and I wasn't, I had no help along those lines, and I just was surviving. And so he had made note of this, that I was a very poor kid. And so, you see, it was, he left the school and he took an attorney's exam and he became an attorney. Then he became a Superior Court judge.
Wow.
And so one day I was guarding a prisoner on a stolen car thing and sitting in his courtroom and guarding this prisoner while he was going to trial. And Judge Poynan made remarks about usually it's the poor kids that are in trouble. But I said, I've got a good example right in front of me. And he didn't elaborate any further.
Good for him.
Tell about your paper route before you went to school.
Oh, yeah, well, of course, the family had no money. And I had a paper route where I had to cross the railroad bridge, go to the DNR, was it? No.
7th Street.
7th Street Theater,
Yeah.
and pick up the Oregonian papers. I had a big canvas bag on my bike and then loaded it up with them. Then I had to come out of there, go across the 8th Street Bridge, and then go down, not Sumner, but the next one over, Anyway, I had to
Yeah.
go all the way down there
Simpson?
and turn around, and come back, and then I had to go out the East Oakham Road.
Out that road.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah.
And so it was so interesting. Some of those dogs out there were big enough to run straddle my back,
That was before school.
and that was at 4:00 in the morning that I
Oh,
had to
my.
do that.
That's why you had to really hustle to make before the tardy bell sounded.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was and it came a little money in, you know. Of course, that was before I went in the CCs. When I went in the CCs, they paid $1 a day in board, and that's not much, $30.
Yeah.
But they fed you and
Mhm.
took good care of you, and I did well in there. I got an honorable discharge when my time was up.
Tell about what you've done since you retired.
How much time you got?
Well, we need
We'll
to.
do some brief ones, like fire commissioner. That
Huh?
tell about the fire, Griffith Fire Department and stuff.
Oh yeah, well, after I retired from the law enforcement, we lived out. Let's see. First it was Steamboat Island Road. No, it was. So then we went to Prairie Ridge Drive.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Steamboat Island Road, right? Yeah, that's where the fire department was. So anyway, there was a guy that I knew real well, and he talked me into accepting the appointment as fire commissioner out there. And fire commissioner's like a three-man group that works on the budgets and stuff.
Okay.
I had budget experience working for the city. So anyway, I stayed with that job until I moved to Prairie Ridge. So when you moved out of your district, you give up your thing. So I had 4 years in. So I moved out of the district, so I had to give it up. And I moved over to Prairie
Well,
Ridge.
How about your gardens? Tell about how many gardens you've had.
Well, we'll go to the Squally Reach.
Okay.
Well, anyway, Helen and I, my wife Helen and I, we went out to the boat launch out there at the Squally Reach, and so I was out there and we saw this building, and so we go in. And it's kind of an aquatic show place. Tanks with critters in it and everything,
Mhm.
and it was a really nice little setup, and it belonged to the state, I guess. I don't know who else would have had it, but anyway, we got a job out there, and not a paying job, a volunteer job, and so our job was to clean up the place and stuff like that, but it had a good view of the whole area out there, the Squally Reach. And anyway, we were, let's see, what the heck?
You know, you mentioned water tanks. What were in the tanks?
Oh yeah, there, now I'm back. The tanks had all this display of sea life in it,
Mhm.
crabs and stuff like that.
Oh, anemones. And yeah.
Yeah, and they had one wall like this that showed the channels in it where these sand shrimp was going around, and you could see them crawling around in there. But anyway, my wife Helen was a teacher's aide for the little kids. So every time that somebody'd come in there with a group of kids, she immediately got right in there, and she's instructing, and she learned all about these things so she could instruct all about them. She just loved that part. And I did just keep the place clean.
Mushroom Club.
Oh yes, always in Ocean Shores. See, we moved to Ocean Shores 1975.
Okay.
And we had a house built out there. It was we call it the Sea Chalet. It was a chalet on the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
The first floor was all garage and stuff like that. But anyway, so we've moved in there, and we see all these mushrooms everywhere. These red ones with the white spots.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we decided that we're going to find out about these things. Well, in 1980, I had retired, so I had lots of time. So anyway, we found that there was a lady that was a University of Washington mushroom instructor. And she lived there in Ocean Shores, and she worked, and she had her little schools and stuff there. And so we got in with her, you know, and we became her prize pupils.
Oh, wonderful.
And when she left Ocean Shores to go down to Oregon, she gave us the keys and everything for identifying all these mushrooms. And she said, now it's your job. So we set up, and we had classes in schools and taught people about these things.
Excellent.
And
They did a mushroom show.
yeah, we did a little, well, I say Helen did it. I sat there like a dunce, but anyway, we did a little mushroom show, which I have a copy of here.
Oh.
That's
Video.
very, very interesting how much that she knew about mushrooms and how she could handle those big words.
Yeah. they do get rather drawn out with all the Latin.
She was a very sharp lady, very sharp. And anyway, we were on the list when somebody got a scare of a mushroom poisoning. The hospital would call us, and we'd go to they were at Ocean Shores. We'd go to their house and see what it was that they ate that they thought might be poison. And I looked at this one place and looked at all these mushrooms, you know, and I said, well, I don't think I'd eat those if I was you. Why don't you let me get a sack and take them home?
Well, Cliff, I'm probably taking up enough of your time.
Well, I'm enjoying myself.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed our conversation, learned a lot about your time in Grace Harbor and a lot about what was going on during World War II as it affected this area, that stories I had never heard of before. So
Yeah.
it was
Well,
really
not too
interesting.
many people know about that submarine.
Yeah.
It was the news then, but you know they kept the news down. They didn't broadcast it. The only reason I knew about it is because we were involved.
Well, Cliff, what I'll do is I'll get this transcribed and then send you